Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call the regular Board of Finance meeting for Monday, December 21st, 2020 to order. First item on the agenda, public forum. Anybody wishing to address the Board of Finance in public forum? Seeing and hearing none. Going on to item number 2, approval of minutes. Regular meeting minutes of November 16th, 2020. Do we hear a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Jeff and Megan. Any comments, corrections, edits?
I have one question.
Yep, go ahead, Ken.
On page 5, the last line says, the last line under revenue says discussion on tax payments, but there's nothing added to that. It's just, that's the complete statement. Did we miss something?
I did notice that, and probably for meeting minute purposes, should be maybe clarified a little bit more. I'm trying to remember what the discussion on tax payments were. I believe it was on the how they've been coming in based on the pandemic. If I remember correctly, Mary Jane, Matt, Tracy.
It was a question that I asked.
It was. Okay, Bob.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, was that it? Was that the question about how we're doing on timeliness of tax payments?
It was, we were at such and such percent, and I just asked if there was any speculation or any indication about the chances of catching up, and if so, by when.
Okay.
And it's an unfair question, but we asked it anyway.
Okay. All
But
right.
I will be answering that tonight.
See?
Sure. Look forward to it. I did have a couple of small corrections on page 2, right about in the middle on the regular meeting minutes, second paragraph, second sentence, standing building committee chair is on the meeting. And on page 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 paragraph down, starting with Dr. Balstracy, explain that right now they have students at Baldwin on remote learning. And item number 5 in the first motion, 4th paragraph down, just a misspelling, excuse me, on Trotta. Needs an A. I have nothing further. Okay, if nothing further, then I'll call a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed or abstain? I think we're all there, so. Okay, moving on, item number 3, correspondence, standing building committee minutes. These are from the December 1st meeting. There was plenty of time to get them to us, so we have them. Questions, I know our standing building committee chairman, David DeMeo, is on again this month. Thank you, David, for joining us.
Good evening, my pleasure.
Questions for David regarding the meeting minutes of December 1st?
I have 2.
Ken?
David, on item 14, the last section on contingency for the Guilford Lakes project, the comment is made that it's a little higher because you haven't completed the testing for the presence of asbestos. So my question is, could that be even higher than a little higher? Do we know the extent of asbestos presence in the building? Could it be a significant number?
I can't answer your question as to the value of the asbestos testing. The way I understand it, when Cliff builds his budgets, he carries a contingency for asbestos testing, but doesn't actually perform the testing until the project is ready to move forward for bidding. So I can't tell you whether that contingency is adequate too much or too little. I can only tell you that we did discuss it, and that was the answer we got from Cliff, is that he doesn't normally do any testing until the project is ready to move forward for bidding.
Ken, why don't we stay on that real quick? The question that I had was on that project. Lakes was the project that was supposed to go to bonding and was delayed because of the vote and the pandemic. The 2898 number, is that including escalation?
Stand by, I'll see if I have those notes with me.
Okay. It does appear to be more. It does appear to be more, but I don't
have the bonding notes home with me. But
okay.
there was an escalation clause for each one of the projects in the bonding. Did you guys receive the bonding attachment to the minutes?
I think so.
No, there was
Okay.
not. No.
All right, let me check with Cliff in the morning and ask if there's any reason why we shouldn't forward that to you folks. But as a general rule, when the bonding is developed, the spreadsheet is developed, there is a contingency line item and an escalation clause.
We usually, David, we usually do get that, but it comes with the Board of Education budget
Okay.
books. So that backup will be typically is included in the capital or in the bonded projects.
There clearly was a line item for escalation.
Yeah, we're familiar with the sheets. We just
Okay.
I just want to make sure that escalation, because it's one of those rare projects that was supposed to happen,
Right.
supposed to go to vote and then delayed a year. So
One of the projects had an escalation clause.
great. Okay, thank you. Ken, go ahead. You had a second question.
Yeah, I had a second question about the estimate on the turf field. As I recall from previous minutes, there were two estimates that were presented, and one of them has now fallen off the table. One was for somewhat less, maybe I can't quite remember. I think it was $300,000-400,000 less, an alternative approach. And I didn't see that even under further consideration. I'm sure there's good reason for it, but to see that other bid just disappear, I was a little puzzled by it.
Well, we actually haven't gone to bid yet. What you may be referring
Under
to,
consideration, I should say.
Yeah. what you may be referring to is the turf infill products. We had 3 or 4 different infill products that came before the board.
Right.
And I don't recall now which one we selected, but after deliberation, we selected the turf infill product that would be part of the bid specifications. And
Okay.
you're correct that there were values placed on each one of those turf infills, and we weighed cost against safety in making that determination.
Good. Thank you.
So that's slated to go to bid just after the first of the year.
So I have some questions that are sort of general.
Wait, Jonathan, hold on one second.
Sure.
Just hold. The stadium turf field is going to bid after the first of the year.
Right, it should be ready to go out to bid right after the first of the year.
Are we doing that prior to? I'm a little bit confused. Are we doing that prior to an approval of bonding? Or are we getting the bids? Actually, maybe I'm
Maybe they're just getting the bid documents ready.
We're getting the bid documents. We're going to go to bid, and then we're going to be ready to go when the referendum is approved. Okay. That makes. Dr. Balstraci, would you like to add something to
Yeah,
that?
I believe that's true. And I also believe that my understanding, because the Board of Ed had some questions and concerns about infill choices, I feel like the bid may be going out with an opportunity to still make that choice.
With alternates or deducts?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Now, I
Just
just
a
need to talk that out. All right. So we'll get good numbers going into the referendum in terms of what that number is going to be and what the infill will be in more detail based on that, which does make sense. Okay.
Yeah,
Jonathan,
David,
Jonathan, go ahead.
I have questions about the performance contracting. And
Sure.
really, you may have to bring me up to speed a little bit because to tell you the truth, sometimes I forget exactly where we're at. But I kind of wanted to know how we're doing with that and, what's on the forefront, a little more detail about Section 8.
Okay, the performance contracting, I'll speak to the fact that the only thing that the standing building committee is now involved in and waiting for design and information on is the solar projects. And that's the last piece of the performance contracting that I believe we're involved in. And the choice was selected. We had Melissa Jones or Baldwin Middle School as the options to put solar on. And after deliberation discussion, we've chosen Melissa Jones as the best candidate, best bang for our buck. And we're waiting for there's some state paperwork that's being filed now for approval. And I guess we're waiting for some design so that we could then approve that part, or at least consider approval of that part of the project. I think that's the last piece we're waiting on.
Okay, my memory is bad, I admit. I'm trying to remember. We were going to do this on another facility, right? And then we found that we couldn't.
Oh, yes, it was down at the Public Works facility. The
Okay.
Original performance contract had solar slated for one of the buildings down at the Public Works facility. And it turned out that that building structurally was not able to support the solar panels, not so much the weight, but more of the wind uplift on them. And the rehabilitation of that building just didn't make sense. It would throw the dollar metrics way out of whack on the project. So that money has been diverted to Melissa Jones as part of the performance contracting.
Okay, and I think, I'm talking about this last time, Dave. I'm not sure if you were at, one of our last meetings, but, I had concerns that if we're not finished with all the projects that they needed to do for the overall contract, how is it going to affect the way that Johnson Controls would compensate us if we don't have the energy savings that we expect? But I'm not sure that's a question for you, but that was.
No, it really isn't. I was going to say that's got to go back to the town council for comment.
That's the impact I'm worried about, whether.
Yeah, there's obviously some concerns, but I don't know if I can't comment on that stuff. That becomes more of a legal question. I think it's being dealt with at another level.
Okay, Matt, I'm wondering if you have any insight. Just, is it going to affect the way we get compensated from Johnson Controls?
Obviously it will, because we haven't seen some of those savings in the timely fashion that we thought we would. Mary Jane can probably fill you in a little bit on the overall EPC contract, and the fact that we have gotten our rebates from UI or Eversource, and we seem to be tracking very positively towards the savings numbers that we were anticipated to get. Mary Jane, you want to talk a little bit about what we received in terms of the rebates, which, as most of you recall, the rebates were the numbers that made the first couple of years savings actualized, obviously, because there was an anticipation that we would be ramping up as we put this in. So the rebates we've gotten from the supplier side are the ones that we were depending on for the savings in the first couple of years. Mary Jane?
Well, as I've reported the last couple of months, and it's still there because we're making the adjustment this month, under the selectmen revenue, we are showing just shy of $300,000 of revenue, and most of that is the rebates from the energy performance contract, of which a portion will be going to the Board of Ed. I really don't know if there's any more coming. I'm not that closely connected to the contract. I really rely on Cliff Gurnham for that information, so I can't add any more to the conversation.
There is one more anticipated round of rebates coming from one of our suppliers.
So the rebates aren't necessarily the energy savings. They're.
No, but as you might recall, Jonathan, the front end of this deal was loaded with the rebates as we ramped up to get to full production on the energy enhancements to see the decline in the energy cost. I think we've talked for the last 2 budget cycles about the energy cost on the town side. Now, realizing the town is 1/5 of the entire contract, but we have already seen a decrease because those projects were relatively simple. They were ones that we got completed early, right out of the gate. And on the town side, we've already seen those kind of savings. The bulk of the savings are coming on the school side. And as you've just heard, we've had some projects that were delayed. I think you know that over
Yep.
time.
I've been following that a little bit. Yep.
Right. So, but it was always anticipated that the analysis on the break-even analysis and the financial numbers was based in the early years was based on the rebates getting applied over the first 2 years of the contract.
Okay. And those rebates are what, directly from the Eversource?
They're directly from the energy suppliers. That's right.
Okay. All right. I'm getting the gist of it a little bit. Appreciate the update.
Well, if you do, you gotta fill me in because it's pretty complicated.
Yeah, I'm wondering at the end of the day if we're going to be able to figure it all out and know that Johnson Control is compensating us the way they should. And I think it kind of counted on the other engineering firm whose name eludes me at the moment.
Jonathan, it's ECG, and I have been working with the ECG
Yeah.
consultant as well as their marketing and PR folks because they have a report that's going to be ready for us to release sometime in the early part of 2021, which will tout the effectiveness of the EPC contract. So the long-awaited evaluation apparently is about to be released, and I think you'll be pleased to see that we are realizing the savings that were anticipated at the outset and implementation of this agreement.
It just took a little longer to get there.
Let me ask you if I remember this correctly too, Matt. Were they going to do those measurements? And then you're saying it's ECJ, right?
ECG.
Were they going to do those for
ECG, yeah.
2 years? ECG was going to do that for, I think, 2 years.
Yeah, but that won't go until that won't actually start until we're satisfied that we have all the measures in place.
Okay, is there a possibility that we'll end up extending that because after we see if they have expertise in measuring?
Yes, as I just said, we will extend the 2-year period to the time when the project is substantially complete. That's when the clock will start ticking on the 2 years.
Okay, I meant even in addition to that we may stick with them if they prove that they can measure and sort of hold Johnson Controls to their agreements.
Right. The effectiveness of the measures should be evident from day one. There's nothing that's going to change that will dramatically change our performance over time, with the exception of one thing, and that would be rate increases related to the utilities, electric, gas, and electric and gas costs. Those are the only 2 variables. If we don't realize or those numbers exceed what was anticipated in the original calculations, that could change that could change the results.
Okay, so that'll unfold, you think, in early 2021?
Yeah, that's the plan. As I said, I'm working with ECG's marketing and engineering teams to come up with a report, which they are looking to use as a testimonial for a success story.
Okay, so ultimately we'll see if things are working or if maybe JCI may owe us.
Oh, we've been through that. We've been working with ECG to determine whether or not that is in fact the case.
Okay, all right. Sorry, sometimes I go over this for a second time, but trying to get it
Fine,
all
no,
in
so second and third time is warranted.
It's been very complicated.
Yep.
Thanks, Dave.
It's been very complicated.
Anything else on standing building or for David? I don't see any more questions. I think we're all good. David, thank you very much.
My pleasure, folks.
Thank
Have a
you.
wonderful holiday. Happy New
You too.
Year.
Have a good holiday, everyone. Have a good evening. I appreciate it. Be
Okay.
well.
Thanks,
Safe.
Dave. You
Take
too.
care.
Okay. Moving on to correspondence, item number 2, pension committee minutes. I did have one. It's at the end of the minutes. Basically, it's an update that I was wondering if our first selectman or Mary Jane had, which was regarding the comment about the upcoming budget season with pension assumptions. And I guess in response, there was going to be some advice possibly given on pension assumptions at the December 16th meeting.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I'll be happy to handle that.
Yeah.
And Bob Hartman, please correct me if I speak out of turn or make a mistake here. At the meeting, there was discussion about changing the discount rate. As you may recall, we have over the past 3 years, and maybe even longer, we have been dropping the discount rate, which is the assumed rate of return on our pension portfolio, to more accurately reflect the realities of the market and what we traditionally earn. We are currently assuming a 6.25% discount rate or rate of return on our investments. Millman at the December meeting recommended that we drop it another 1/4 point to 6, which puts us squarely in line with our traditional returns over, I'm not sure how many years, Bob, but you probably have a better handle on that than I do, having served on the pension committee. But nonetheless, we have been consistently trying to reflect the realities of our performance, which I think is reflected in the health of our various pension plans. We are very well funded at this point, in the 80s, in the 80% and up range. We may be close to 79 on one of them, but nonetheless, it is probably prudent for us to continue to take the actions we've been taking over the past several years and reduce that discount rate. I will, however, caution, and I said this at the pension meeting the other day, the mere fact of taking the discount rate from 6.25 to 6% will result in an increase in our pension contribution that is equivalent to somewhere between 1/4 and 1/3 of a mil. So we had some discussion about that at the meeting last Wednesday. The pension committee is going to come back with a formal recommendation at their January meeting to determine what they think. Now, we have traditionally looked at 1/4% cuts. There are other alternatives. You can go to an 1/8. You can do whatever number you want. But clearly, I think the direction we've gone in over the past couple of years is the appropriate one. We ought to continue that trend. The question is, when you guys get down to brass tacks and what the potential budget increases and the tax increases are, you'll have some flexibility to play with that. Bob, what did I miss?
Well, actually, I think over the years, the performance has been, over the last 15 years, has been something like an average of 9%, 8.75, 9. Mary Jane would probably tell us. It's still one of the best in Connecticut, but all the same, it's obviously prudent. This is the way to go. It puts us at the most conservative end of the spectrum among other municipalities in the state. There's still plenty that are still lying to each other for themselves and they're still up around 8% or more. So the last thing you want, and we're not as well funded as we were a few years ago. Right. It's slipped a bit. So, needs must. It's something that has to be done. And I think the pension committee is doing the right thing here.
Bob, real quick, if I could ask from the non-pension guy, you just mentioned last 9 to 10 years that it's been right 9%. What has it been the last recent years, 3 to 4? I mean, it seems like it's lower. It's the lower end of it, right?
Well, Mary Jane, I had I had it in front of me the other day, and I don't have it tonight.
Yes, the beauty of being at my desk, so to speak, I'm able to pull up the information from our consultants. They gave us a performance update as of November 30th. In the last month, we were at 8.8. exceeding our benchmark of 8.1. Last year, we were at 15, exceeding
Yeah.
our benchmark of 12.5. 5 years, we were at 9, 3 years and 5 years, we were at 9.3 both years. 7 years, 7.7. And back as far as our new consultants could do, we're 8.8 since
There it is.
inception
Yeah.
of the plan.
All right.
I got a question. If these actual rates are so high, why is the assumption rate kind of ticking down a bit? Just because of the future prediction?
One of the issues, of course, is that bond rates, 40-ish% of the portfolio is bonds, and bond rates are down to zero. So that means you're really looking at the equity markets for all your return. And the equity markets have been on fire for various reasons. And there's a certain sense that that may not last forever, or you shouldn't be counting on it as a pension fund. So it's a defensive mechanism, Jonathan.
Okay, thank you.
And the numbers that I'm quoting are a snapshot in time. And those numbers fluctuate high, sometimes into the negative at sometimes during the year. So it's hard to really say.
Which we just saw.
And one of the challenges we have is when Millman makes a recommendation, they make it based on the value of our portfolio and the return as of June 30th, 2020. Now that takes a 3-year rolling average. There's some kind of blending that's done over that. But for those of you who looked at your own portfolios at the end of June, they probably are nowhere near what it looks like today or a year ago. So unfortunately, we had the valuation that Millman does is based on a period where it was not our returns, not our returns, but our portfolio was not in anywhere near the shape it is today.
For those of us of a certain age, you remember that things like the 10-year bond for years and years was the interest rate reflected there was economic growth plus inflation. So if you had economic growth of 3%, inflation of 3%, your 10-year bond was at 6%, and now it's less than 1%. And you would have that as your sort of benchmark for returns on pension funds, on long-term money, long-term investments, with equities is kind of the sweetener. They, volatile. You'd hope, again, it's a smoothing thing. It's a long-term thing. We don't have that luxury anymore. We can't count on bonds like fixed income like we once did.
Right.
And that's the problem. That's the challenge. And of course, there are other issues that especially on the non-qualified employee side, the Board of Ed is dealing with now. So it's all about, it's not what you make, it's what you keep. Yeah.
Well said.
Any headway on some employees taking the payments instead of the lump sum, or the trend continues that they keep taking lump sum? In my unofficial analysis, it usually seems to be a lump sum that's requested.
I don't know. I think all I've heard is that that's going to be a topic of discussion. They're allowed to do so. There's nothing to stop them. There's just one group. And
Bob, you're absolutely right, Bob.
Yeah.
That's subject to collective bargaining agreements.
Yeah, nothing we can do about it right now.
no.
Anything else to pension?
Nothing, only that you're tagging on to that conversation about the lump sum distributions from people. When we're negotiating it, I think there needs to be an emphasis on how detrimental it can be to the overall health of the pension if employees continue to take huge lump sums out. I mean, you could have an employee, 40 years. That's a significant amount of money that's detrimental to the health of the overall plans. I just think that education and informing people is very important. I don't think people are aware that it's detrimental.
You're absolutely right. One of the delicacies of walking through the HR experience with employees as they elect to make their choices is you have to be very careful about what you advise them to do or
Yeah.
not do based on whatever reasons you have. Not the least of which is there is a potential that their ability to manage their money as well as the pension committee may not necessarily be actualized. So there's a very fine line we walk in HR with allowing in the discussions with employees relative to their choice.
Yeah.
I have a question. I don't know the answer to this. When their payment stream is paid monthly or over time, is it annuitized? Do they get a built-in return? Is there an incentive for them to maybe take a package and let, Guilford basically manage their money, I would say, in a sense, than taking the lump sum and trying to manage it on their own?
No, those are those are actuarial dollars. Millman calculates the value of the pension over the course of an anticipated lifetime and calculates the lump sum benefit. So it's a purely arithmetic formula that is done, and to try to incentivize one way or the other obviously would require collective bargaining changes, and potentially could be problematic because market conditions change all the time.
Yep.
And those kind of incentives might need to be adjusted on a very, very frequent basis.
Is the lump sum payout, I would think, discounted?
Yes, it's obviously discounted. It's present value, future worth.
Yeah, okay. So there's some kind of return built in if they take the payments over time.
It's a fixed arrangement based on the contractual agreements with the union.
Well, I guess the biggest difference is when you're in a defined benefit pension like that, you are guaranteed, the day that you retire, you have your choices to make. You can take your lump sum, or you can take a menu of payouts, just yourself, you and your spouses, whatever else. But those payments are guaranteed. And, you're paying no fee for the pension committee to manage your money for you, but whether they do a good job or a bad job, you're going to get the money. If you take the lump sum and manage it yourself, if you do a good job or a bad job, you suffer the consequences. That to me is that's the big difference.
That's the risk factor.
Yep. I'm wondering if there's some way to sort of incentivize them to let us do the monthly payout.
But Matt, there's no COLA, right? There's no COLA for the monthly payout.
No, the only pension plan in town that has a provision for reviewing COLAs is the police department. And they have been and will be banging on our doors to consider COLAs. So you're absolutely right, Megan. There are no COLAs built in, nor are there any requirements in any of the union contracts save for the police department. And obviously, the Teamsters is not our pension any longer. But that's the only agreement that requires us to contemplate COLAs.
Anything further on pension? Otherwise, we will move on to agenda item number 4. Review and accept report of expenditures for the Board of Education for November 2020. I see Mary Best joining us this evening as our reporter, I guess, our reviewer.
Thank you.
So I will hand it over to you, Mary.
Thank you. So our expenditures for the month of November were $5,798,453.33. Expenditures and encumbrances through the end of November were 38.43% of the budget, as compared to 35.67% in the prior year. That approximately 3% increase is largely due to COVID-related expenses, as you can imagine. Our warrants totaled $3,336,072.64 last month.
Okay. I guess we'll open it up to questions. Where did it? Under employee benefits, probably came up over the last couple months. I'm trying to remember. Unemployment compensation. is much higher than last year. Is that a number that is going to now stable at this, or is it going to go over budget at this point with the unemployment compensation?
That's a great question. I punt to Linda because that's
It is going to, well, the last bill that I received has gone down considerably from what I had been receiving.
Oh, you went on mute, Linda.
Sorry,
There
somehow
you go. You're good.
my computer somehow does weird things with the button sticking. So unemployment it's trending down right now. The latest bill did go down a little bit. I'm hoping that trend is going to continue. There were some credits that we'd gotten from unemployment, so it looks like they're starting to catch up on some credits that we were due. So I'm hoping it's going to be over budget most likely. But the months of $11,000, $12,000 bills, I hope are not going to continue.
Right. So the trend is slowed down.
Yes.
Okay. On purchase services regarding dues and fees, it was a fairly high percent at this time last year, but it's higher now. It's actually over now. Does that have to do with? Well, actually, I'm not gonna guess. What brings that number up higher than last year?
Actually, there's a charge in there for IB testing fees that we will get back. So we have about $11,000 that'll be coming back to us, which will bring that line back closer to being within budget.
Is that the November expenditure that's shown as the 11,000 number, or was it something from earlier?
I believe it was in last month's.
Yeah.
So I think that 11,000 is something different.
Oh, okay. Okay. So maybe in October. Okay, but that's what it is.
Yes.
Okay.
Can I ask a general question? Because I really don't understand what is the issue with food service program? I mean, it seems to be this ongoing back and forth about it. What is happening and why? Do we know?
So, I mean, they were doing great. Before COVID, they were making money. They were great. Then when we into the shutdown, we weren't selling meals. So we were providing meals free for any child 18 or under in the town. And we were only getting the state reimbursement, which isn't meeting our costs. That has thrown them into this deficit. We haven't taken in any revenue at all other than what the state gives us for each of the meals that we serve. And it does not meet the costs of labor and food. And we are not the only ones.
I was just going to say, if I may add, this is happening across the state. School systems are dealing with this across the state. Linda, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, that's okay. I've talked to a number of business managers. I've had joint meetings with other business managers and other food service directors from the SNACT committee. And everybody is facing the same issue. We're all looking at ways trying to increase participation so that we could get some revenue. We are trying to do what we can to sell.
Yeah.
Looks like Matt wants to add something.
I just have a question, and I think this needs some clarification for the community. Everyone is entitled to a free meal regardless of need. Is that correct?
That is correct. Any child 18 and under, regardless of need, by all means is eligible for a meal.
How was that decision arrived at?
That was an option that was came out through the federal government, then the state approved it. We had to apply for it to be allowed to do this. We think it's a great thing. We trying to encourage everyone to come get the meal. They're not hurting us by, they're not taking food away from somebody else by
Right.
coming to get a meal. So the meals are there. We want people to come get them.
And is there an expectation of reimbursement from the state through one of the programs?
We are getting some money, and there is talk of some other funds could be coming in the future for this as well.
Great. Thank you. I just wanted to
So
make sure.
we are trying to offset the deficit. So at the end of the year, we might not have to incur that cost, or it will be less.
Right, yes.
Linda, I guess I have a comment. I find that interesting. I didn't realize that it wasn't based on need. And I know students do a lot better if they get a meal and, with concentration and so forth. And it just does surprise me a little because, even though we have some tough times, there's probably a high percentage of students and families that, can afford to pay for breakfast or a meal. So just surprised that it's not based on need at all. But the state is supposed to reimburse you for the whole program, but so far they haven't.
Well,
Is that-
no, the reimbursement rate does not cover the full cost. So we do get reimbursed for every meal that we serve. It does not equal the full cost. We have reduced some staff. We've laid off a few people.
Yeah.
We're trying to change up the menu options and try and provide good, healthy meals at the least cost that we can. So we're trying to watch our food costs, trying to come up with ways to encourage students to come and get the meals, whether they're in school or home. So we're doing everything I'm sure there's always more you can do, but we're doing everything that we can right now to try and increase the participation.
Okay. Understood.
Just while we're on this, to maybe close it out, on the operating transfer of the $200,000.
Yes.
Could you explain that?
So we transferred $200,000 to the dining services bank account to cover their payroll and operating costs. We get the money from the state. We have to serve meals for the entire month, and then we get the reimbursement in the following month. So
Right,
payroll and food costs and getting reimbursed almost a month later. So in order to keep their cash flow going, because they're not taking in any revenue, we had to do a cash transfer to them. And we're hoping that at some point they could pay us back.
I guess my question was more, where's it coming from?
Yeah, what are we shorting? What are we taking it out of?
Is it a number of different categories, or?
It's probably going to be a number of different categories, and we are hoping that there will be some federal funding somewhere down the line that will offset those expenses. There's a little bit here in one of the grants that we received that covered some of the extra hours that we had to include, but it was a very small number. So we are hoping that they will cover some of this in other ways. The snack to the food services directors across the state have been working really hard to see what they can come up with. They're all looking for ways to help cover these shortages that we're all experiencing.
Linda, pre-COVID, where did most of the revenue get generated from? Was it the high school or the elementary schools or the middle schools?
They all generated a little bit of revenue, some more than others. The high school obviously was the biggest one. The a la carte sales items at the high school generated a lot of revenue. We're not selling anything now, so we lost out on all that revenue. We we would make a little bit of money on each of the meals we sold and
Oh.
right now we're not.
Hey. Seem to be,
What's that?
Sorry, Ken, I muted you. You can unmute yourself now. Should be able to.
Hey, at least he kept you online, Ken.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I'm never gonna live that down, am
No.
I?
I'm muted.
You're
On,
not any longer, Ken.
What?
You can speak now. We can hear you.
You can.
Yes.
you're all good.
Oh.
On site improvements. Last year, almost, well, more than double was spent last year at this time. And we're about 40, we're at 43%. Is there a reason why we're down on that, or is that just back to a normal amount of expenditure at this point of the year for site improvements?
Yeah, it's back down to what would be normal. Normally, we hold off on doing site improvement until the end of school. And we always hold off on site improvement because we never know how the budget's going to turn out. This is more of a normal trend than what we had done the year before. The year before, we were able to do, we did a couple bigger projects that up front that cost us money right off the bat in July and August.
Right.
Can you explain the instructional materials category? That seems to be overdrawn.
Is that the computer lease?
Instructional, oh, equipment instructional,
Equipment.
you mean, Ken?
I was looking at instructional equipment.
Oh, okay, yes. That's items that we purchase and we will be reimbursed by the technology lease.
Yes.
Okay. And when you see that large number in custodial, does that reflect any of the COVID relief we're getting in that category? There's only $12,000 left in that.
Huge encumbrance.
That is not necessarily COVID related materials. That is mostly the timing of the purchases. They just did a big order to start getting some of the regular cleaning supplies and things in. They usually do 2 or 3 purchases a year, and they've already put in for their bulk of their second one. That's why there's $37,000 of encumbrances there.
Okay.
So going to the COVID total, we were talking about an increase of year-to-date expenditures were just over 1 million.
Yes.
And it was 611. So the 453 amount is
Well, a big part of that
The tenth.
last expense or the
but
expenditure
it's the
was,
encumbrances on supplies.
well, there's also the final payment for the tents included in this month's expenses, which was over $200,000, if I remember right.
So we own them now.
Yeah, that was my question. Are we leasing them or are we keeping them?
We own them.
We have bought them. When we priced it out, it actually better to buy them out than what it would have cost to rent these for the period of time that we were expecting to use them. We do have the option of possibly selling them back when we're done and getting some of the money back. And there's some that would be considered to be kept and used for ongoing, possibly. But we did buy them outright at this time.
Was the amount in November the largest amount that we've had in a month?
For,
For COVID, for the COVID related expenses, the 453.
53.
And then a follow-up question to that is, but because of the tents and some of the other, and the encumbrances and maybe some other items, that may be a anomaly on the 453, and it'll be less. We'll keep
Yeah.
accruing, but it'll be a lesser amount.
it has been a higher amount this month, mainly due to the tents and some of the other expenses that were related to the tents in here. December's is probably going to be less than this. We'll also start seeing, we
Excuse me.
received our first distribution off of the two grants that we received, the ESSER grant and the Coronavirus Relief Fund grant. I will reflect those payments that we received on next month's report. So you'll see an offsetting credit for a little bit of those expenses next month.
And my understanding is that most of the at least to everybody's estimation, most of the big investment or most of the investment in equipment, the big ticket items has been made, and going forward, most of the expenses are anticipated to be largely supplies and of that character. We're not anticipating similar expenses like tents or things like that going forward, correct?
No, we don't anticipate anything else. We do have some more desk shields, small quantities. They're ordering them for central office buildings because we haven't received any for our conference room and for Lathrop House conference room. Most of the schools have them. The only way that would change is if we do go back to 100% in person at the schools. We may need to purchase more to accommodate for all the students being in the buildings. But that's all depends on if we come back 100% and what that looks like in the buildings.
COVID relief, question on that. What do we anticipate in receiving from federal and state authorities on this over $1.3 million that we're into right now?
Right now, we have been awarded just under $600,000 between two grants, the ESSER grant and the Coronavirus Relief Fund grant. We're hoping that there's going to be more funds available in this package that's being approved now. Some FEMA money from expenses from the end of last year, and I have not submitted anything for FEMA yet. To Mary Jane. I don't know when that's due, but I haven't provided anything else requesting for FEMA at this time.
So the present total of reimbursement is something like $760,000?
No, just under 600,000.
100,000. That leaves the town and the schools with an enormous burden.
Yes.
$500,000 and counting. Okay,
Yes.
so it goes.
No surprise.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else for Linda and Mary on warrants, financials, operations?
I was
packet?
just curious, Mike,
Agenda?
is that all aid exhausted after we get the amount that's close to 600,000? Or is there opportunities for additional COVID aid?
Hopefully there's some aid in this package that's being voted on tonight.
I'm sorry, I meant from the state or other sources.
Mike.
Go ahead, Mary Jane.
Mary Jane, go ahead.
I can give you a brief update of where we stand on town and the Board of Ed at the moment. We have already received cash in hand, just shy of $99,000 from the state's Corona Relief Fund. Of that, 55,000 was given to the Board of Ed. That represents all that they put in as of June 30. And the balance of about 44,000 came to the town. There was a balance for the town. We were eligible for an additional $139,000 through the Corona Relief Fund, and the state has provided that funding for us without us having to jump through as many hoops as we did for the first 99,000. So that money is going to be coming directly to us. That is the balance of the original estimate that we gave them back in April or May. So the money that the Board of Ed has, that includes that 55,000, which we had a little taboo. We had only put in 25, but we got 55 for the Board of Ed. So that balance will most likely stay with the town, but we'll see how that works. We have about $95,000 pending with FEMA. The majority of that is overtime for fire department, since they denied the majority of all of our expenditures, and of which were all approved by the state. So everything we've put in so far, we've received reimbursement from. We just ended up taking more from the state side than FEMA. FEMA is denying mostly everything. So we will, so as far as I know, all the state funding has already been accounted for unless they vote on additional funding. FEMA, we are starting to put the next group together. So Linda, anytime you want to send that, we'll be doing that in early December for the 6-month period, July through December. And again, FEMA is only approving items that are directly related to a coronavirus event. So in order for us to have the approval of 75% expenditure for, say, disinfecting town hall, there would have had to have been a corona event in town hall, which precipitated the disinfecting. If we do it just for preventative measures, that is not covered by FEMA. So anything really that the fire department does, I have a very good chance of getting reimbursement, and a slimmer chance of other items through FEMA. But we are continuing to seek out every opportunity we can for funding. We've been pretty lucky so far. We received everything. June 30, we pretty much became whole at June 30. So we're really talking about items for this year. The town only has, as of right now, $80,000 worth of actual expenditures, not counting the overtime for the fire department. So we're in pretty good shape. The Board of Ed, it's harder for me to get that big chunk of money that the Board of Ed is seeking, unfortunately. But anything we can do, anything we can find. We have sought out a couple of health district grants. We received funding for our new contract. The person that's doing the contract, whatever that is, I can't think of the term.
Contact tracing.
Contact tracing, I'm sorry, I drew a blank there for a second. So, we are seeking every grant we can. I'm in communication with finance directors all across the state, which is how we found out about the health director grant, because it came at a time when Dennis was leaving and Sonia was coming in, and it kind of, fell through the cracks, but we were able to get that back up. So, all I can say is both the Board of Ed and the town is doing all they can to try to recoup everything we can, and we'll just keep you updated.
So I think you might have mentioned approximately $330,000 of aid. And then I believe Linda just mentioned that she expects some kind of aid of around 600,000. Is that getting close to a total of around 1 million or 900,000 and change?
Right, but Linda's million is different from our money, so.
Yep, I understand. So is the
And I
money that you
believe-
just mentioned all for the town? I think you said you would split it between the town and
Right.
aside from the fire departments.
We
over
had
time.
$55,000 of the money we received was already given to the Board of Education. I believe Linda mentioned that part of the 600 she was speaking about
I
included.
see.
the
It's
corona-
overlapping.
Yeah, Linda can, tell me if I'm misspeaking, but I
Yep.
think her funding already incorporates the money that we've been able to provide the Board of Ed.
Okay, but you expect another 139 that you'll apportion out to the Board of Education?
Yes, we'll have to see how that goes. Again, the Board of Ed gave us, we had to give the state an estimate of what we were going to spend. And there was there was an issue with the spreadsheet from the Board of Education. It totaled 25,000. It was really 55,000. So I have given them the full 55,000, even though I only had 25 allocated. So it all depends how much we can recoup from FEMA. We really have to parcel it out at this point. I can't say that I'm not giving anything to the Board of Education, but I can't say what that number is either at the
So
moment.
at the time, we were looking at an estimate of 55,000, but now we're looking at what, actual expenses of almost 1 million
Well,
for the Board of Education?
keep in mind that the state asked us for this estimate back in April or May. So we had no idea we were going to have $1.3 million worth of expenses at that time.
Right.
And that's all the state money that I have been allotted at this point. So hopefully the state or some other entity within the state will provide some funding. But at this time,
Yeah,
I only know what I know at the moment.
I think the question I'm asking is kind of poignant. Can we ask for additional aid now that we see all these additional expenses?
Matt, did you want to go ahead real quick?
Yeah, I do. I think it's important for people to understand the context of the numbers. What Mary Jane just said is in April, we were asked to estimate what it would cost to get through the balance of the fiscal year. And that's the money that we have received commitments for, and we've actually received the money, and Mary Jane is talking about how we're going to allocate and dole that out. The state has just recently come out with a change in how they're going to fund the expenses from July 1 to today. Because they are now going to some formula-based arrangement based on population, density, and there's one other factor. So they've completely changed the reimbursement on COVID-related expenses to more accurately reflect, and I hate to say this because we always lose in these things, the formulas that they base ECS on, or they base other things on. So I want to make sure people are aware that the next round of funding may not necessarily be expense related as much as it is going to be formula driven based on our population, our density, which we lose on because we're one of the larger land masses in the state of Connecticut. And then there's, as I said, there's a third factor. So we will be submitting by the end of the month. We don't have the middle, we've got about a week and a half to submit our expenses. However, we're going to wind up getting a formula distribution, is my understanding. And I'm not sure that there's $700,000 sitting out there for Guilford out of the 45 million that the state has allocated for this next round of funding.
If I could summarize what I think Jonathan was asking before at the very outset was there's only so many pools we can go to, right? Only so many grants we can get money from. And so between Linda and Mary Jane, we're doing everything we can to submit on a timely basis to get as much money as we possibly can, whether it's expense-based or formula-based. But as Veronica said, there's another package being voted on by the federal government that maybe there's something that could come out of that. But we're doing everything we can based on what's out there, but it's very limited. I mean, there's very few sources for this. Not that they're not huge amounts that are being given out by the state and the federal government in totality, but we're only going to get that portion that is going to be either expense or formula based. But Matt, thank you for adding that about the formula based, because I did not realize that, which is how in the state a lot of grants are awarded. When you talk about school reimbursement grants, there's a lot of grants out there that are based on wealth rank, they're based on population, a lot of different factors. So
Yeah, I'd just like to add one more thing, that FEMA and the state and some of the other agencies that are providing funding are considering some of the stuff we're doing now just regular operations. So through June 30, they reimbursed for masks and sanitizer and cleaning supplies. And now specifically FEMA is now considering those just part of municipal operating budgets. So at least on the town side, you know, a lot of our regular stuff may or may not be reimbursed because of that.
New normal.
The new normal.
So, you know, Mike, what I was really kind of asking is, seeing a shortage now after we've kind of talked this out a little, of approximately 600,000 on the school side and 80,000 on the town side, is, you know, do we expect to get more assistance? And then I think the answer is yes, and that we'll be applying for it. And the answer, the assistance may come as a formula-based amount. And as Matt clarified, he does not expect 700,000 or so for Guilford, but some amount is on the way, right? Some amount is expected.
as long as we,
Yeah,
as
there's
long
a,
as it-
there is a prospect, there is the prospect of us getting additional funding. I think the larger opportunity is going to be what comes out of the bill that is being voted on tonight in Washington. Even though they stripped the state and local piece, I understand that there was a provision for education in that $900 billion
Yep.
package. I don't know the details on it. No, they haven't even written a goddamn bill for them to vote on. Excuse my
Yeah,
language.
I tried to find some details.
They were
Didn't do
still, they
very
were
well.
still trying to put the language together on that bill. So I defy anyone to tell you what's actually in there and how much is there for education. But there would be an expectation. You're absolutely right, Jonathan. Wherever there is an opportunity for us to get reimbursement, we're going there.
Okay.
You know, it just makes you think that whenever we lose out because we're well run, the compensation should be that they should lift restrictions on well-run towns like us, state regs.
Agreed.
Quick question, when the funds come in, do they get allocated to the, how do we divvy it up once we get the funds?
Well, I can tell you on the town side, as of June 30, we removed all of those expenses from the individual budgets and posted a receivable amount for the town. So when that came in, we just applied it to the receivables. So right now, if we receive the money within the fiscal year of 2021, then we will indeed apply those directly to the expenses so that each department will be made whole.
Great, thanks.
It would seem like if the assistance wasn't tied to a specific expense, that we would maybe divide it up in proportion to the budgets of the BOE and the town. Does that sound not fair?
I would think everything is pretty well separated, isn't it? From the two budgets.
Or maybe the assistance comes back for specific expenses.
Well, that's exactly what happened. The 600,000 that the board is reporting. I don't think that the town has a right to a piece of that. That was clearly Board of Education related expenses. So
I see.
It's a delicate walk, but we'll make sure we do it fairly and appropriately.
Yeah, and I'll add that Linda and I work closely together, and we typically don't make these decisions, outside the box. We talk them through, unless they're cut and dried, expenses or whatever. But we would certainly discuss what we were doing in the same way we discussed the medical budgets and the pension budgets and all of that. We would certainly try to come to an agreement on what's done before we move forward.
Yeah, at the end of the day, we're all in the same boat.
Agreed.
It's all taxpayer money at the end. Mhm.
For the 2 grants that we did receive, we had to provide specific descriptions on where we were going to spend these funds. So for both grants, what we did was I looked at items that we had already purchased or I knew we were going to be purchased, and I allocated the grants to cover those expenses that either we had already paid or I knew were coming. So they are to very specific items. There were restrictions on what areas we could spend those funds on.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I'll just say, like, through our audit process, even though the state, the $139,000 we're getting from the state, they're not requesting us to supply line by line invoices. I will have to show that in the audit, however. We will have to prove that we use that money for the purposes of which we've said. Luckily, because of the overtime for the police department, the fire department, we have more than enough expenditures to cover that fund, even just on the town side, so we don't have to worry about it. But I don't want anybody to think it's just found money and we can do whatever we want with it. The audit will require us to prove how we've spent it.
Makes sense. Thank you. Anything else for Board of Education for Mary, Linda, Dr. Ballas-Tracy? Okay. That being said, I will entertain a motion to accept the reported expenditures of the Board of Education for the month of November 2020 in the amount of $5,798,453.33.
So move.
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions or recusals? Excellent. Linda, Katie, Mary, thank you very much, as always.
Thank you.
Feel free to stick around. I know Linda will.
Or get a life.
Number 5.
Sorry, Mike. Happy holidays, everyone. Good night.
Thank you, Katie. Take care. Mary, you too. Review and approve report of expenditures for the town government for November 2020. Mary Jane?
I feel like I've already given my report.
Yeah, well, anything else you want to add?
Sure.
Yeah.
I'm going to talk about revenues.
Sure.
I'm going to start with the good news. You'll see that our tax collection has been brought all the way up to almost exactly where we were at this time last year. So things are looking good on the tax collection front. And Matt can talk a little bit about what we're doing for January 1 when I'm done with my report, because we'll be doing that deferral program once again. So tax collection is good. The golf course and Public Works continue to bring in their revenue. The golf course most likely be slowing down now that the snow is on the ground, but through November, they were already 93% received of their budget. So they did well during the pandemic. Public Works did well with their stump dump. Unfortunately, that means we've had a lot of storms and people had a lot of items to bring to the stump dump, but that is already over 100%. The first line, the selectmen, that's the EPC credits. We're going to be divvying that out. I have to say that this was a reminder to me to do it, so I put a reminder in my calendar to get that done now. I'd be remiss not to bring the finance department and its interest into the conversation. Interest rates continue to be low. We have not been able to bring that line up much higher than it has been since July. And even though we probably have pretty much close to the amount of funding invested at this point now that our collection is up, but it's just all interest rate driven, unfortunately. Anybody have any questions on revenue?
Nope.
Okay, I will move on to expenditures. Not a lot to say about the expenditures. We're pretty much where we should be at this point. I did want to bring your attention to the revised budget line, the second or the third column on my spreadsheet, just to show you that we did in fact allocate these salaries as you guys approved last month. So that has been done. So now when you look at each individual salary line, it better reflects where the percentage of where we are at this point. So since we're about 41% through the year, the majority of the salary lines are at the same rate. Other than that, all of our expenses seem to be tracking fairly well, fairly common to where we were this time last year. Other than the ones we've talked about previously, the town clerk, registrar, all related to the elections and the primaries. So if anybody has any other questions.
I had one question.
Go ahead, Ken.
I had one question about natural resources. I'm always looking at the whole tree removal area, and I noticed that there was a lot taken down, but yet where there's still money in there. Are we comfortable that they will not need any transfer into that account this year? Can we anticipate that?
Well, you know, hard to tell at this point. Kevin usually does another round of trees come the spring, if he has funding and what he needs. I haven't spoken to him specifically about it, but you know, typically a little hard to tell at this point.
Yeah, because he's only at 37%, so.
Yeah, it's actually pretty good at this point.
Very good, considering that I think this month there were invoices in excess of $10,000 that came through on that.
Yep.
Okay.
I don't want to promise any surplus there, however,
Oh,
yet.
this says after all, the first day of winter.
I think part of the art of that is to get the electric company to do a lot of that work. I think he does a good job with that, Kevin.
Absolutely.
He does. Very
He
good
does.
job.
Anything else on expenses? I don't think I have anything. I don't actually. Can move over to warrants, special fund to start. Pretty straightforward.
Quick
This
question,
is
just out of curiosity, what's the Big Y senior shopping program? Is that getting groceries for seniors who can't get to the grocery store?
Yes, it is. It's a
Exactly.
Guilford Care, the Guilford Cares program, and we're reimbursing the expenditure. We're actually managing funds that were deposited on behalf of that program through Park and Recreation.
Great.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to go back to one item on expenses, if you wouldn't mind. Mary
Please do.
Jane, Registrar of Voters, where are we going to be reflecting the state's contributions to the election expenses?
We are, I'm sorry, I should have mentioned that. Yes, we did receive some funding from the Secretary of State's office that we will be applying to the expenses in the town clerk's office and the Registrar of Voters, that those numbers just haven't been finalized yet.
Okay, that's why I just want to make sure
Yes.
we understood that there was an offset to those expenses.
Matt, if you could just refresh the public, if you know the figure, what was our turnout for the election November? It was pretty high, as I recall.
I think we're pretty close to 88 or 89%. There's a pretty good chance we're going to win the Secretary of State's award for voter turnout for the third time in the last, I think, 12 years. There's a great opportunity for that to happen. So, and Jeff, thank you very much for that softball. No, I'm serious. The folks Bob Hartman's one of the volunteers, as I see his face on his screen. We were blessed to have a significant number of people who volunteered to participate in this election. And we needed all of them owing to the fact that we had over 6,000 absentee votes that were cast at this vote. Not a problem at all with the way this thing was handled. So we had, I think, in excess of 60 or 70 people volunteering either on as poll watchers or working to do the absentee ballots, or working to process absentee ballot applications in advance of the election. So it's just a tremendous turnout, great volunteer effort. It wasn't all volunteer. Some folks got paid, deservedly so. But Jeff, thanks for that softball. It went off, I think, without a hitch. And I also, a quick shout out, Bob Hartman doesn't get all the credit in his family. His wife, Laura, was the major domo of absentee ballots. So Bob, you can give her some credit too.
She's head moderator and she was in charge of the town, the write-in mail-in ballots, which meant that my role, Matt, just to correct you, was not at all voluntary. But thank you.
And she often sits in on these meetings, so this one she's missing and she's getting all these accolades.
I know, how about that?
It always works out. I the volunteer work was impressive, but I do want to also just reiterate the work that the town clerk's office and the registrars did. I mean, in addition to processing and getting people registered, processing the absentee ballots, there's a lot of other business that particularly the town clerk's office has to do. And the times I went in there, everything was running very, very smoothly at a time where there were a lot of demands on the folks' time there. So I just want to make sure that they get some credit as well.
Jeff, thank you very much for that. I'll make sure I pass that along to them. And let's remember, they're putting themselves on the line. They're interacting with residents day in and day out. So they're clearly essential workers, and that's why they're there to continue to do the town's business. Thank you.
Anything else on warrants?
I just had one thing caught my eye on
Sure.
the warrants. A property tax refund in the amount of $4,300 to some source in Houston, Texas. Does anyone know what that was? It's Sonova Helios Issuer LLC, page 9. That's a large item.
Kind of likely a business owner, no, in town?
Well, it looks like it's a number of different tax refunds, different accounts. So, it could be
Probably a
it could
leasing
be
company.
cars. It could be leased cars that are going back, especially with a name like that. I don't know specifically. If you want to know, I can certainly ask the tax collector tomorrow.
Thank you.
The aggregate number is pretty large, but it's composed of, with a few exceptions, relatively small refunds. So I think
which is why I'm
Oh,
thinking
batch,
it might
it's
be a series of cars, but I'm just guessing at that, so I can find that.
Usually happens when you have a Nissan, Toyota, you have one of those leasing agents, leasing borrowers. So
Yeah, I'm totally off base, so I will check with Deb tomorrow and get back to everyone.
great, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, should we go over to medical? Still trended lower than last month, but now we're hitting December and January, so.
Yeah,
Curious
so
whether there'll be any, with kind of weird, before it was like, well, there's breaks, but breaks are now kind of, there's like this gray area of breaks. on how it works, but you know, and with the COVID spikes, you know, I believe there's still not a lot of you know, voluntary surgeries and things like that. So
Yeah, and Linda and I and other staff members met with our consultant to go over our numbers for the upcoming budget, and they didn't have a crystal ball either. So you know, they're hesitant to say that our surplus can be used in another manner, not knowing whether or not things will eventually hit the fan, so to speak. Once COVID is over, certainly our surplus is well enough that you know, we probably could use some of it, but this is one time where even I would recommend keeping more than I normally say, just in case.
we did hear, and I'll try to recap this later, that we did hear from the Board of Education in our joint meeting prior to our regular meeting that insurance was possibly going to have a bit of a reduction based on the numbers here and based on that meeting. Do you see the town being on the same path of a you know, slight reduction or a medical?
Yeah, I did sit in on the earlier meeting too, so
Right.
I heard that conversation. The town has the advantage this year of being on the receiving end of the a lower allocation as far as contracts in the medical fund. So the town is seeing a reduction because of that. Last year, in the current year's budget, it was the other way around. So our budget went up. So we are going down. Linda and I did speak after meeting with the consultants and choosing numbers based on what we got, the information from the consultants, and also recommending a small usage of the medical fund to help the budgets even a little bit further. So we, both the town and the Board of Ed will be coming in slightly less, at least, you know, just in the straight medical fund.
Right, initially anyway. Okay.
Initially, yeah. And you may choose to do even more than we did, because we were very conservative. So, you know, leaving the final decision up to all the boards.
Okay.
Thank you, Mary Jane. Thank you for that last statement. As you may recall, I think we've had some discussions over the years relative to the use of fund balance out of this account, as well as the respective contributions levels. And I think we got to the point where we wanted to have agreement amongst the three major boards in this community about the use of those funds. And clearly, any use of surplus in that account, I will give my cautionary tale once again. That leaves you in a position of the following year of having to go find that same amount of money to keep your budget at a flat and level position. So while Mary Jane and Linda are going to be recommending this, I think there will be some discussions at the Board of Selectmen level. I'm sure there'll be some at the Board of Education level and clearly at the Board of Finance level as to whether or not we use those surplus funds to offset operating budget increases. I don't need to remind you of my warning last spring when we used unassigned fund balance to offset and mitigate tax increases. This is doing exactly the same thing. And once again, we'll need to find that same money the following year in order to keep ourselves level. I get off the soapbox now.
And I will add that Linda and I had that exact conversation when we talked about the amount to pull out of that fund. We knew that same thing would happen next year. So we had that conversation as part of our deliberation on coming up with the number that we chose.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question about that. Mary Jane, was it maybe you who had mentioned once that possibly 3 or 4 months of surplus was recommended by the vendor. I think maybe that kind of guesswork came from.
Yeah, I usually recommend at least 2, and they recommend up to 4. So, or at least 3, possibly 4. Their numbers are always higher than what we kind of feel we need in there. So, this year I'm tending to think more along their lines than what I usually say.
Okay, well, you know, I mean, I've expressed my opinions. I think we're overfunding the medical, and then we're using the money for different things after, and we should just try not to overfund medical. Try to keep our surplus around some kind of target.
Well, we're
And,
getting,
you know, we don't pick our medical numbers out of a hat. The consultants do a tremendous amount of data analysis for us. And like I said, we meet, it's Linda and myself and our HR director, Mitch, and Jason's usually with us. And, you know, so there's a lot of people looking at the numbers and crunching them and trying to come up with as good a number as we can.
Understood. It's a guess. It's a
yeah,
an
and
estimate.
I look at this and I couldn't, I think I said voluntary before, I couldn't remember the word, but what concerns me is the amount of possible elective procedures that are going to be done when this is all over. You know, is it going to be $2-3 million worth? Well, you know, that will drain it very, very quickly. If all of a sudden over a year or 2 period, we're seeing numbers like 1.3, 1.4, because all of a sudden there's elective procedures going on everywhere to catch up.
Are elective surgeries covered?
Of course they are.
Yeah.
But there'll be more. It's just it's the quantity that will pop that number. When that's going to happen, I don't think any of us really know. If I were guessing, you know, probably won't see anything for another probably, I would say 9 months to 12 months. I don't think anything's going to really happen until June, when there's a break, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, when we were having this
I'd be
conversation at
concerned.
the end, when we
At the
had
end
this
of-
conversation at the end of the fiscal year, we thought maybe it would happen in January, but that's
Right.
not going to happen.
Right.
So,
Well, we knew there'd be a spike, but you know, everyone talked about it, but then it happens and you're still seeing numbers at where they are. So.
Well, Mike, your position lends credence to exactly what Mary Jane just said a moment ago, which is she would tend to err on the conservative side and have 4 months of IBNR completely set aside, because that is when you would use the surplus in that account. When that spike hits, we need to have that there because we would not have we would not have budgeted for that kind of spike.
right, and thank you, Matt. Thanks for that softball. When we discussed the numbers with the consultant, we did not put anything in the budget for that makeup. So the numbers in the budget do not include any anticipated additional expenses to make up for items that haven't been done over the past 9 months. It's purely based on where a typical year should be.
I don't know how you could actually really predict that either.
Right, which is why they recommend having the fund balance, because if that hits, that is not part of our projections for the upcoming year. Am I saying that correctly, Linda? Does that? Yeah.
Will we be keeping an eye a little bit on the ISL
Oh yeah.
portion of the insurance and seeing as we go forward if it keeps being something that's not, I guess, not working for maybe the first year last year, right?
Well, it worked because it hit the percentage, right? It was a 70% percentage that they say that as long as you hit that, then it's technically it's worked for you.
That's 70% is the break-even point, really. Yeah.
Right.
Oh, 70% is the break even. I'm sorry, I didn't
Yeah.
realize that. I
And
thought if the
anything-
ISL premium was higher than what was covered, then we didn't, make out. We didn't really kind of win.
The consultants tell us 70%, and that's why I started putting I have the percentage that calculates there each month so that we can see that. So
Right.
typically we've over 100%, which has really saved us a lot of money, which is why our ISL premium has gone up.
Why
So-
did they say 70% though? Wouldn't that mean that instead of paying the ISL premium, if we had just paid the actual expenses, we would have saved 30% of the ISL premium?
That's the buy down for insurance is what they're talking about. That's a 30% premium to buy down that insurance. The reality here is that what we're budgeting against and doing is the catastrophic stuff. So if we're starting to take a look at whether or not we do ISL because we don't think that there are going to be a lot of elective surgeries, that's not where the cost comes in. These are the catastrophic claims. They are cancer. They are very severe cases. But typically that 30% is just a buy down, a premium for having the insurance to capture the downside risk. And
the ISL doesn't kick in until $150,000 worth of expenses for particular case. It's not by person, it's by particular case. So if I have elective knee surgery, unless something really goes wrong, it shouldn't hit that catastrophic. So as Matt said, it's typically cancer. It could be a really bad pregnancy. We see a lot of that and those types of things.
Well, don't get me wrong. I mean, I've seen this thing work consistently over years where I've seen the covered amount exceed the premium amount. But I think last year was maybe the first year of my recollection where we paid, the premium, was higher than the amount that it paid out. So I thought we, didn't really profit from opting for the ISL for last year.
But we didn't. But on balance, over the past 7 to 10 years, I think we have consistently beaten the ISL number, which means we had a bad year. And also,
yeah, and I would think that absolutely. I've seen so many years where it's worked well.
And what's happened to us is the insurance companies have caught up with us. They continue to raise the cost of that ISL to a point where it is more difficult for us to get there. So you're absolutely right, Jonathan. This should be an area we ought to take a look at and see whether or not the risk analysis suggests that we go without it for a year.
Yeah, and I would think you got to kind of keep an eye on it. It's not something you want to just jump on after a 1-year trend.
Right.
You got to kind of think that through, smooth it out. Yep. All right, just curious. We're going to keep an eye on it.
I couldn't have said that better myself, Jonathan. The trend is really the important, is the key to the ISL.
I think you guys are teaching me, and I'm a parrot, and once I get it, I can almost say it back. But yeah, I hear where you're coming from, and it's just one of those things where you opt for it, and over the long haul, it's been working well. And we had an odd year, so we got to just keep an eye on it, see if maybe we're having more years where it doesn't add up for us.
Yeah, I'm guessing anything in 2020 is not the year to
I know.
Use as any baseline.
I wish we could just erase this year from memory.
Oof. No kidding.
Yeah.
Anything else for Mary Jane? Okay, therefore, entertain a motion to approve the report of expenditures of the town for the month of November 2020 in the amount of $2,157,077.
So moved.
I'll second that.
Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions or recusals? Okay. Item number 6, discuss and take possible action on Board of Finance 2021 meeting schedule. Anybody have any issues with the schedule? I did note that the presentations from the Board of Education in town will not be on Valentine's Day this year.
Thank you.
It seems like every year it falls on it. I don't know why, but it just does. So I think we're free and clear on that one. I don't have any issues with the calendar, and we do have to vote on that, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Do I hear a motion to approve that, approve the schedule?
So moved.
Second.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Item number 7, committee reports, building permits. Anything on building permits? Anyone? Okay, moving on. Item number 8, old business. I did have one item under old business, and it was really just more of a recap because it came up under new business last meeting. That was the capital plan presentations. Matt or Mary Jane, I don't know if you want to add anything to this, but I did just note that what we heard on that afternoon where there were presentations of the capital requests of all the departments, there was a little over $4 million requested in bonded capital projects, about 3.2 million in grants and lot SIP requests, and 2.4 in general fund. And that's that 2.4 is what would usually in totality fall into the budget request for capital under that capital line item. Obviously, we all know you've got your work to do, and I think most of our Board of Finance members were part of that presentation. Unfortunately, I had to leave, I think, before the last one. I almost made it all the way through, but I couldn't make it to the last one. But I think quite a few of us were on that. So I don't know if there's anything else you want to add. I just wanted to do a recap that we heard that. So Matt, go ahead.
Yeah, I do. At this morning's Board of Selectmen meeting, we had an agenda item from that included the fire and police department. They have made a revision to their capital request. You may recall there was a request from the fire department for 2 bays to be added to the facility. And also the police department was looking for additional carport, sally port, storage area. They've put their heads together and come back and said they would like for us to consider a combined freestanding 4-bay garage a la Butler Building, something along those lines. That would basically take the request for $1.5 million for the 2-bay addition to the fire department, which is fully more structural brick kind of thing, as well as the $250,000 from the police department. Combine it. They have some preliminary numbers on a Butler Building, somewhere around 800,000, but that obviously, at my questioning, does not include significant fit out on the inside of that facility. So you need to put things like exhaust control things, exhaust control systems, et cetera. But they're thinking closer to around $1 million rather than the 1.7 that the 2 had requested. So they'll be coming back to the Board of Selectmen and obviously to the Board of Finance with a set of revised numbers. They'll be using the on-call architects to come up with some decent numbers along that. And they anticipate giving us some numbers at by your meeting in January as an update to the capital projects. But you're also correct. The Board of Selectmen anticipates making some revisions to the request. They will not be handed along as presented to you. We'll come up with some kind of something that reflects some reasonability.
Is that kind of building like a steel frame building, a Butler?
Yeah,
building?
the classic Butler building. The question is, where does it fit on that property? There's a parking lot, there's a basketball court, there's space behind the fire department. So they're going to take a look at the feasibility, some kind of feasibility where they could put something that would house 80-foot bays.
Would the price include insulation and like some kind of heating and climate control?
Yeah. That preliminary number of 800 for the structure includes, insulation, power, bathrooms, heating, HVAC, that kind of thing.
Okay,
but
kind of a no frills garage type.
Right. Well, it's probably a little better than no frills, but not an awful lot until they start. And that's why they've been charged with putting in the frills. What's the additional build out? There's possibility of a lift in there so they can do maintenance work on vehicles. Obviously, the exhaust control system that the fire department already has in their main garage, so they can run those engines in there on a periodic basis and get the exhaust out. So the numbers, I think it wouldn't surprise me if their number didn't come in somewhere between $950 to $1 million for that new facility, fully outfitted.
I hate to say it because I love a bargain, but our town facilities do have a look and an appeal to them. I wonder if there's any kind of brick facing or something that would make it sort of blend in.
There are things. I'll speak on the architect's end. There are things you could do with the Butler Building. Obviously, you know, the more you do, the more there's cost, but there are certain facings and sidings that you could do to, you know, give it
Okay.
a better look, but that'll be up to the, you know, the on-call architects to determine and work
Yep.
out. You know, I was just thinking about this, before I segue into new business, which I'll just briefly recap, our Board of Ed meeting prior. There was a discussion about there was about right now, currently, there's 6.2 million that they're looking at in terms of bonded requests. And on the town side, you don't have to give me a number or give us a number or any projects yet, but the town is intending on going out for bonded projects as well this year. Is that correct? Because
That's correct. We're gonna adhere to the 2-year cycle. Every 2 years, the town usually puts something in there. And we'll be coming forward with something.
right, so it may not be 4 million, but there will be a question with projects.
Agreed.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. That was it I had under old business. Anything else?
Well,
Anybody?
yeah, while we're still on old business,
Sure.
Mary Jane talked briefly to it earlier today. The collection rate on our taxes, despite the deferment for the 3 months, has gotten basically back to the same level we had last year. You may recall through in October, I think we were down about 5%, or through September, we were down about 5%. It started to drop in November. It was 2.7% down year over year, and now it is back to a normal collection rate. So the anticipation is not anticipation. The governor issued an executive order last week. That was I think it's 9R, which basically commits every municipality who opted for one of the two or both of the deferments for the July 1 tax bill they presuppose that you're going to be doing it again. You have to do one of the two. So at this morning's Board of Selectmen meeting, the board voted not to change the decision we made last spring when we opted to do the deferment as opposed to the lower interest rate. The rationale for that at the time was lower interest rate on delinquent taxes would have reflected folks who were delinquent prior to the COVID-19. There is a consistent feeling that we still are in that position, although there will be some additions to the delinquency list as a result of the July 1 tax bills. But we feel that the deferment is the better of the two options for the community. So we left our decision unchanged, which means it automatically rolls forward without a formal vote of the Board of Selectmen to commit to the deferment and or any other legislative body in the town. So basically they're going to have, I think is it Mary Jane, is it 90 days or is it, was it April 1st? I think it was April 1st in the executive order.
The tax collector said it was April 1st.
Right. So yeah, the July one was a 90-day deferral, which didn't necessarily line up with October 1st. So I'll have to take a look at the executive order and see if they changed that or not. Because remember, February only has how many days? Oh, this is leap year. They got 29.
No, that was last year.
Yeah, that's right. Last year, that's the year we're in.
Right.
So there's only 28. So that would clearly change if it was 90 days. But I just wanted you to be alerted to the fact that we'll be doing that. Obviously, we'll be doing it again.
Okay. Okay, great. Yeah, thank you for that, for the update on that. Under new business, I actually have 2 items. But the Board of Ed and the Board of Finance met right before this meeting. Anybody can join in and add anything if they'd like to. Dr. Freeman gave us a little bit of a idea of what the initiatives were going to be. I jotted them down very quickly. maintaining a safe environment for the students, instructional distance, holding on to that as a model and trying to improve upon it, and then continuing to improve the culture and instruction regarding equity and social justice. So those were the 3 items I saw. None of them are big ticket items. The one thing that Dr. Freeman did tell us with the Board of Education is that this may very well be one of the most conservative budgets he's ever come out with, largely because the understanding with the pandemic and the challenges we've been going through. There were just a couple of other things I had written down, but I already talked about those. The Board of Ed is looking at coming out with projects for bonding, just like the town is. So there'll be extra questions that will be voted on at referendum, assuming we have one. I'm praying that we have a vote with all of my might. That's my biggest Christmas present, is I want everyone to be able to get out and vote for the referendum this year.
I don't see why we wouldn't.
I don't either, but crazier things have happened. But anyway, Matt, you got your hand up. Go ahead.
Let me give you a reason why it might not happen unless certain things change. And I've already approached CCM about this. The ability to conduct a referendum with absentee ballots does not exist. As you may recall,
Really?
we go to town meeting not less than 7 days, not more than 14 days before the referendum. At that meeting, the voters, 200 of which have to vote in favor of a reduction, minimum of 300 voters at the meeting. So that vote could actually change, that meeting can actually change the budget that you present to the voters. That no less than 7, no more than 14 days does not give time to conduct a absentee ballot based referendum vote. So the question now becomes, can we dispense with that meeting? All right. So now we're starting to trample on voting rights again as we go down the line here. So you need to be aware that possibility, in order to have a referendum where it is predominantly, absentee ballots like the one we just had, will depend largely on what the governor does relative to situations like ours, where charter provisions require certain timelines that prevent the ability to effectively do absentee ballots. Just a quick word of caution.
First of all, thank you for that. Second of all, I'm going to refer to Tracy very quickly. I brought up the Board of Ed meeting. I think it's very important to make sure this is also captured as a separate new business item. I'm going to request that just so that they're not blended in. So it's a different paragraph, because I think it's very important to make that note now that we've been informed of the possibility of that. So I was pretty much complete with the Board of Education report. The one thing that I did want to mention to everyone is that, as we heard, and typically here every year, there's no number associated with what the superintendent is looking at presenting to the Board of Education. Usually does not do that. Wouldn't really even speculate, except for that comment I made earlier about being conservative on this based on the times and the year that we've had. So if anybody else wants to add anything to that, feel free. I just wanted to make sure the public knew that we did meet with the Board of Education as we typically do. We will meet with them again prior to our next regular meeting, which is on the 19th, which is a Tuesday because of Martin Luther King's Day, celebrated on Monday. And we will meet with them again to go over what has been presented by the superintendent, which at that point will go to the Board of Education, and we will hear presentations in February from both the Board of Education and the town regarding their crafted budgets. February 16th, actually, to be exact.
So I don't think anyone on this board needs to question how I feel about this, or anyone in the public. Voting is essential for liberty, and the right to vote should not be a bridge just because of public health issues. It's unacceptable.
So noted. Anything else under new business? Otherwise, I have one last thing. Happy holidays.
Merry Christmas.
I know that I know the Hanukkah is Hanukkah is complete now, is it not?
Yes.
It is complete. So happy Hanukkah to those who have celebrated Hanukkah. Happy holidays to everybody else, and Happy New Year. I think I can speak for just about everybody on the phone. I haven't had a horrible 2020, but I think we're all looking forward to our first meeting of 2021 and being in a new year. And I wish everybody best wishes and health going into next year. I'll go into public forum now. If anybody has anything in public forum, if they'd like to recanter that, they can. Otherwise, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
earlier tonight, I sent out an email to board members asking if there was any consideration to continue a longstanding tradition of the Board of Finance to socially gather at the end of the Board of Finance meeting just prior to the holiday. Some of us have gathered together at local establishments. And I asked if there was any thought to do so after this meeting ends officially, where we stop recording and we have an opportunity to chat as we often did before. I'll leave it to you to suggest. I think I got a couple of folks. I had at least 3 said they would potentially be interested in doing that.
Well, I know I was one of those. I would welcome that opportunity, and just to reaffirm, there will be no business conducted during this little gathering.
Correct.
Once the recording is off, we will talk amongst ourselves about family and friends and the holidays.
Agreed.
Understood.
So thank you, Matt, for throwing that in there, just in case anybody did not get that message. So with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn and stop the recording after we adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Happy holidays, everyone.
Happy holidays,
To the public.
everyone.
Holidays.
Linda, you staying?